put them into the ballad form, which was known by everybody, and said something that fitted the times with traditional music forms. Now, even at the time, I didn't know that he was stealing all these music forms from everybody. Martin Carthy was teaching him these songs, and he would sit with Jack Kelly to teach him songs, and he would be back in my store learning songs from everybody. So you heard everything. And he even still, he goes to visit Happy Child, borrows 50 records, comes in a limousine, and returns them 2 weeks later. Someone else returns it. And so he was very intelligent. He knew what was good, and he knew how to steal. I mean, it's so obvious that, like Patriot Game, and that song Third World War Blues. I'm just going through text of Woody Guthrie's, songbooks that I have. And he has a song called Married Man Blues or something. And I said, my God, this is a direct steal from Woody Guthrie. He's taking the hook, line, thing. He's taking the form, content, the idea. How come Harold Leventhal never said anything? How come Pete Seeger never said anything? So that's what I write in that article I write about him. He could do anything, and nobody complained except me, because there was so much hope, so much promise, so much ideas. But the point is, he wrote very good songs.
What was the...
And he was on the wave of the English movement and the American. He was smart enough to figure out what was going down, and he was part of that, what was going down.
You talked about some of the social interaction, and I'm curious about something which has really been hard for me to recapture. I read about him being close friends at a time with Van Ronk, sleeping at his house, Van Ronk taking
Bob
him
Shelton.
around and helping him, Bob Shelton.
More even.
Having a love and hate relationship with Phil Oakes, being friendly but always cutting him up. Who was running together, if you can remember back then? Were Van Ronk and Oakes and Dylan actually this tight circle of real friends, or did they? Or were they really just sort of business associates and competitors trying to make it in the business?
No, Dave Van Ronk is honest.
Yeah.
He's meeting everybody. Anytime that Dylan wanted to see him, he saw him.
Right.
But it was more on Dylan's terms than on Van Ronk's terms. He would see Jack Elliott. I don't ever remember seeing him together with Jack Elliott. So I think Dylan compartmentalized everybody. As I said, at that time, Alec wasn't let him run loose, so to speak, in the village. There's no reason for him to do a concert for me, actually.
But when he got there, nobody knew who he was. He didn't have the ability to see people only on his terms.
Well, I told you, when I put him on in November '61, nobody came. Nobody was interested.
That's true. Yeah.
And Bob Shelton didn't even review it.
Yeah.
Because there was no money in reviewing it. And I can give you like another little story about Shelton. I go into Harold Leventhal's office one day, and you can print this, he's going to live a long time, so it's okay. I go into Shelton Leventhal's office, and there's a, what do you call it, copy of an article that's going into a paper before it's published.
Oh, like a galley?
Yeah, a galley sheet, or maybe better, a galley sheet, or actually the final form. See, that's the thing I'm missing living in Sweden now. I've forgotten these technical terms, which I don't use anymore. So he had a galley sheet of review of Judy Collins' concert, because Leventhal was the manager at that time. And I thought that was criminal. Why should Leventhal have a copy? In other words, Shelton showed the article to him to ask him if he approved it.
Right.
Now, the same thing which Bob Shelton gets a lot of credit for now, the first article he wrote of Bob Dylan in the New York Times. So in other words, if I write something, it's not at first, or Dave Van Ronk writes something, but coming in the New York Times, then it's official. The first article written on Dylan, to make him big, was approved and read, and corrected and added to by Dave Van Ronk, Izzy Young. I remember the two of us. There probably were other people. You understand?
Yeah.
So Bob Shelton was feeling. Did I do this in English too?
Yes.
In other words,
feeling which way the wind is blowing.
Yeah, but you put the Swedes do. They do that. I thought maybe it was Swedish. Okay.
No, they do it in America.
They do it in America. So I read that, and then we would have his girlfriends who would write about them too. Great stars of all time. There were 2 or 3 girlfriends we had. I won't mention their names now. It's not important. And nobody had respect for Bob Shelton. Now, at some point, I get very angry, and I call him a racist, only writing about the white singers as opposed to black singers. And it was interesting, because at the time I got attacked for what I wrote. And I try to read what I wrote then, I don't understand what I was writing. I don't understand what Bob Shelton was writing. And Erwin Silver's attacking him because Erwin Silver encouraged me to write my article to attack him. First I was attacking him directly, except me, and then Bob Shelton sends a letter out, which I actually found that he feels Izzy Young has problems. I told you yesterday, I said, I don't like when people say I'm old or cranky or bitter or cynical or whatever. I just want to know if I'm right or wrong. And that really drives people off the wall. I don't care if I'm cynical, if I'm right or wrong. So Bob Shelton writes, obviously Izzy Young is troubled. He really needs psychological help, and I think we should get money to help him. And I would sue him for this dastardly deed, but I know he has no money, so in consideration for his poverty. And everyone comes to me to write articles. They don't come to Izzy to write articles. I'm writing jacket line notes for every album in the business. They don't come to Izzy Young. Now I'm proud they don't come to me. Because the one time I was offered to write something, Jack Elliott, he wanted me to write the notes for a sampler album. I had to say something about Jack Elliott, and I had to say something, I don't remember. I just remember him, maybe Joan Baez. So I had to write the back line notes, which I could write, falling back off a truck. I could write a thing like that in 10 minutes. I worked on it for 2 days. I couldn't do it. So I turned down $100. In other words, I was not ready to become the instruments of the use of these big people. So like Dave Gard did a book, and he could only get it out because Bob Shelton was writing the book, The Face of Folk Music. I have yet to meet a person who's even read the text. Yeah. It's impossible to read it. I haven't read it even. It's just garbagey. And then he writes for this youth magazine, and so I named the names of the magazines that he wrote for. So he's using this and this thing attacking me. See, I'm doing this magazine, Izzy, but Izzy's not doing the backline notes because I'm a responsible person. Because at the time he didn't understand, he wrote what the companies wanted. And I couldn't even do this one time, a thing which I wasn't even against. I thought it was nice to sample out, but I just couldn't. It's a long road from the bayous to Carnegie Hall. I wrote something like that. I was like, come on, Izzy, you can't write it. You can't write it. You're dead if you write that. So I had the possibility of making it commercially, too, to give up back what people wanted. So obviously there's something wrong with me. Okay.
Now, you said a few moments ago something that I thought was interesting, but Bob Shelton's first review of Bob Dylan at Folk City, that's considered a very significant review
seminal,
in Dylan's career, seminal. Now, you're telling me that he actually showed that around in draft to you and Van Ronk and sort of got a full sense
that I know of.
But you did see it in draft.
Oh, I saw it.
Van Ronk saw it in draft.
Yeah.
And he kind of said this.
In other words, you have to have the approval of, which in a way is a compliment to me that
absolutely
he came to me.
But it's also something interesting about that, particularly, you were...
You never heard that?
No, I never heard that before. You weren't a performer. Van Ronk was a performer. And one thing I have heard, I don't know if it's true or false, but I'll ask you, is that a lot of people were jealous when they said, why Dylan, why not me? Dylan's a schlemiel, and I'm
the Lokes especially.
Yeah. And was Van Ronk somebody who felt that way at all?
No. I never remember him ever...
Was it true that some people were really jealous about that and went crazy over that review as in a jealous way?
I'm not sure it acted overnight, that review. In other words, he wasn't as big a maker of people like he used to write about Judy Collins and Buffy St. Marie, and he would write pups, and he was famous at the time for never being in the second half. And he would be in the middle, the pause, the break, he would be at the bar drinking, so he never went. I would say his concert reviews were written before the concert. So he would be at the Judy Collins concert when she finally did her first big concert, and Judy waved to me from the stage, and I'm selling her records. I'm the flunky selling her records. And Bob Shelton is writing the review that he wrote of that concert title in cahoots with Judy or her manager and Jack. They are sitting around. Well, at that time, Jack Holzman was putting out the record. That was what the concert was for. Now,
and this was where? This was
Town Hall. Now, Town Hall in '62 or '63, there was something called the Traveling Hootenanny, which I did, which you can check out very easily. which I did together with Al Grossman. You can imagine we put in the money. And who was on this hootenanny? Bob Dylan, Lynn Gold, Sandy Bull. I don't remember the other people, but it was all the people in his stable. And the concert bombed. But I found a program for that recently. And he kept it up, but without Bob Dylan. So in other words, even the Yale lady wasn't big.
He put on essentially package performances at various
Yeah.
venues.
So the first time he made it big in New York was with Queens, Forest Hills Tennis Stadium. That was the first time he made it. I was still invited to that. And I was still at the level, and I got the first seat, the first row.
Well, Dylan did a Carnegie concert, probably 63.
That's 63, but that's not 61, it's not 62. In
Right,
other words,
exactly.
2 years is a long time in the history of commercial music.
Did Shelton decide in advance who he wanted to favor and write his reviews accordingly?
Well, in terms of women artists, he had affairs with several of the women singers. I won't name them now. I have them very clearly in mind who he would write about, which I, compared to myself, would be unthinkable for me to write about somebody. In fact, I'm the only one that never had an affair with a woman folk singer. And I told you, I resent it now when I read about Judy Collins writing in a book. I used to spend the days at Izzy Young's Folklore Center, and he told me about Billy Ed Wheeler, which I sang his songs for the first time, and Izzy Young told me about this, and we had the first meetings for the anti-black list on Pete Seeger was in Izzy's, the back of the store, and the first time I met David Rock was in Izzy's store. But at nighttime, then the debauchery and the drinking and the drugs and the fucking. I said to myself, now why wasn't I part of the debauchery, the drinking, and the fucking, and the drugs? You understand? So I was Mr. Clean, and everyone treated me Mr. Clean. There was some mystic, natural force of nature that was there that you came to when you wanted to find out things. But I'm happy now that I wasn't part of the debauchery and the drinking and the fucking and the stuff like that. But coming back to Bob Shelton, I attack him, and then he attacks me behind my back, writing a letter to all the people on the mailing list that I sent it out to, plus several others. Now, the thing that's dishonest about it, nobody defended me or nobody attacked me. Everyone let it just die by itself. And then there were answers to this whole question of why blues music. And Paul Nelson was there in the New York Times, and Irwin Silver, but I wasn't there. And Mark Spolstra got embroiled in it somehow. I told you, I never felt that Mark Spolstra as being part of the scene. I don't see him as intrinsically important to folk music. That's why I resent it with him. I could understand how you're wrong when you say he was more available than the others.
Okay.
Because he's not important, so it's not important whether.
Oh no, it might not be important, but I think in Spitz's mind, he was a source that he could use.
Well, then he got hustled.
He
didn't get the right track. Because I think Dave Brown. I haven't read the book. I've just fingered through it. Dave Brown is in the book.
He's in the book.
Dave Brown even told me the other day that at some point Dylan became afraid and called up Spitz to be interviewed. And Spitz said, "Go fuck yourself or something. I don't need you anymore."
Yeah, and Spitz puts that in the book from his vantage point.
Oh, it's in the book
he
also.
He puts it in the book, yeah, in his introduction.
So Dylan was fairly unknown for 2 or 3 years. I think the real big step was when he went to England. And that's when he became big after that. And then at some point, somebody in Columbia told me, it wasn't David Ryan, maybe 5 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever, that Dylan doesn't have any friends below 14th Street anymore. And I told you that I'm constantly being asked for people, how do you feel about the song that Bob Dylan wrote about you? I said, oh, you mean Talking Folklore Center? I'm prepared for the Talking Folklore Center. What's that? So no, we mean West, positively 4th Street. So I've seen all kinds of involved explanations of it, but I told you how I felt about that already. I think it's on tape. That he was the one that left, so he's the one that's bitter. It's his problem. But I showed the article to my niece the other day, and again there was this mystic feeling. Who the fuck am I to say anything? What? So I say, I have rights just as much as Dylan has rights. So in when did he have the so-called motorcycle crash in California?
66. He was in Woodstock.
But he had the accident in California.
No, he had the accident in Woodstock.
Yeah. Okay, I don't remember.
Yeah, he had the accident in Woodstock.
The so-called accident.
So-called accident, 66.
Because there's not one doctor's bill, or there's not one visit to a hospital,
right,
or anything. So he disappears, comes back to the village. Al Aronowitz attaches himself to him because he was a folk music producer, and then he became a country music producer. He writes an article in the Saturday Evening Post, which is very contemporary at the moment. Well, it's 68, or he'd been in California. He hadn't been in New York City in 2 years. Right. Al Aronowitz writes the first new interview with him after the accident. Well, it could be 67, but I think it was 68, but I have the dates down. And I have a notebook, actually, on the subject. Actually, you may have to give me some money so I can copy the notebook and send it to you.
Okay.
Even though you paid the $400 for the cover. Because I have a notebook which details my problems with John Cohen and Bob Dylan at the time. Well, we'll work out something. And Al Aronowitz writes the story. The only new piece of information in the story is, the normal story, for the Wild and Willie West, the Greenwich Village, and all that kind of stuff, and then rock and roll and folk music, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only new piece of information is in the first paragraph. And my mother reads and said, Izzy, did you see the attack on you in the Saturday Evening Post? I says, what attack? And Happy Traum comes to me, Izzy, what is this between you and Bob Dylan? And Ethel Ram comes to me, Izzy, what's going on between you and Bob Dylan? I said, what's going on? What? So I go downstairs and I buy the magazine. I read it. And it says, Bob Dylan is walking on 6th Avenue and 4th Street. That's where my store was, on 3rd Street. He walks down the street, and that's a very big thoroughfare. I mean, there's thousands of people by all the time, even now. It would be like 6 or 8 people thick, 3 people walking this way, 4 people walking that way. And the only new information in this article is, and this champion of folklore, this big fat blabbermouth on 6th Avenue and 3rd Street, walks past Bob Dylan and doesn't recognize him. And I say to Bob Dylan, you see that big fat blabbermouth who everyone knows in the village, the world authority of folk music, didn't recognize you. And then Dylan says, well, he never recognized me. And then that's the end of the story. So meanwhile, I'm getting this underhand thing, including John Cohen. And I say, gee, this is not fair, because if he named me, I can defend myself. Being unnamed, I can't defend myself. So I called Al Aronowitz and said, who is this big fat blabbermouth for 6th Avenue Authority on Folk Music who didn't recognize Bob Dylan? Never recognized. Who is that? I said, I don't remember it. I don't know. I said, what? And then Margie Seeger, Mike Seeger's wife at the time, who he dropped because she began interested in other things than folk music. She liked the Beatles, for example, the way I did. And she said, oh yeah, everyone knows you're the one. So I write a letter to Bob Dylan, which has now been reprinted in its entirety, just about, in this English magazine, The Telegraph, which I know Bob Dylan gets. International circulation, 3,000. It looks like a pornographic magazine, where instead of seeing tits in every page, you see Dylan's picture in every page. And I forgot about this. Oh, well, I write a letter to Bob Dylan. We're going to the history, Bob Dylan's stories. I write a letter to Bob Dylan, and I say, I don't quite understand it. It's possible I didn't recognize the body I saw in front of me, which is quite a statement. I don't make statements like that. But if you saw me, you could have said hello to me since we're friends. And how I feel bad that John Cohen tells me that you have a baby daughter, but you don't tell me that. Or you can always come to my store, and how happy I was when I had this filming with Andy Warhol, or poetry reading in my store. You were invited. You were always invited to anything I did, but you didn't invite me to your house just a block away on Lower McDougal Street. And I own feelings too. Can you imagine the nerve of me to say, I own, I've never used that term again, ever. I own feelings too, not just you. Because I'm telling my own nieces telling me, who are you? Who are you? To complain. He comes in the very next day. He walks into the store. I don't recognize him. Except I make a computer, a computer picture of him, walk, cat.
Yeah, I understand.
Or he wasn't any longer this clean-shaped kid that I saw. And he looked broken down, old, terrible, unhappy, miserable, unhappy eyes. And it took me about a second to recognize him. But I had to put, as I said, I had to make computer images in the space of a half of a second. And he comes in and says, "Hey, Izzy, what's up?" And I said, "You asking me what's up? You're the one that's up. I want to know who that big fat big mouth yapping folklorist on 3rd Avenue, 3rd Street and 6th Avenue was, who didn't recognize your greatness now, didn't recognize you now, and never recognized your greatness anyway." He says, "Oh, I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" So he came up with a line which I've written, glued into my retina for the rest of my life. He said, "How do you know it wasn't anybody else? How do you know it wasn't somebody else?" So I think, as a lawyer, can you figure out the syntax of that sentence? How do you know it wasn't somebody? It's not would you call it a normal English sentence?
No.
How do you know it wasn't somebody else? So I said, "Okay, there's no point in talking with him." So I said, "Bye. I hope everything's okay." So Al Aronowitz, who's now living on, do you know the name Al Aronowitz?
I know the name.
He's now living on Relief in Washington. So I got the latest issue of the Telegraph. And he has the same, he's writing the background story of Dylan. So extrapolated into this news version of, in other words, he has to sell the story. So there's a 10-page story, but there's nothing really new in there, nothing to get at. I was with him, and his wife didn't look very happy. I saw Bob Dylan, he didn't look so happy. In other words, he's looking for things, but with no information. And then he suddenly comes, and Israel G. Young, the proprietor of the Folklore Center, the world famous, he didn't recognize him or something like that. Or Marge Seeger, in one of my notes in the letter, she says that the reason they didn't put my name was he had considerations for me, out of consideration for me. So I read this thing, well, he has no longer these considerations. I've been away for 20 years. He doesn't even know if I'm alive anymore. And so I sent an answer to the magazine, which they published in Toto, with the letter from Bob Dylan. But I'll get a copy to you. So in other words, what I'm saying is, the folkies, the folkniks, all the people like me and Dave and the others are still around. I think Dave Van Ronk has survived. I've survived. I don't think Jack Elliott has survived. I don't think Mark Spolstra has survived. And Dave Blue is dead, and Bloomfield is dead, and there's 22 people I remember are dead. It's probably a lot more. They didn't survive because they got caught up in making it, which Dave Van Ronk never did.
Did you hang out with people outside of the Folklore Center? Did you go out, and outside of events, did you go out and drink, or...
No.
You mentioned that a little bit earlier, and so that piqued my interest.
Being a nice Jewish boy, I still don't drink.
I mean, there are legendary stories of Van Ronk and Oakes, downing,
I never was...
20 in the kettle of fish. Did you ever go there?
No, I never went there.
You ever go to the Gaslight and hang out?
Well, I went to the Gaslight sometime, but I didn't hang out.
You didn't hang out. Okay.
I went to the Figaro sometimes to drink coffee, but I never hung out. I never hung out in any of the drinking places. So what Judy Collins describes in her book is correct. In other words, you went to Izzy for information, for songs, those things.
So you didn't play poker, with McCurdy and at the, late in the night.
I read all these things. I don't say, where the fuck was I?
Right.
I was fucking
these young girls are coming to your store for information and assistance, so you'd assist them.
Well, Eric Darling remembers something. He comes to my store and I'm receiving oral sex, as they call it now. Back to my store, so he said, "Why should I watch that?" He walks out of the store.
Some other names, some you've mentioned. of the singers who did protest music, now they call it topical songs, but it used to be called protest songs.
You can see Tom Paxton said, I'm not a protest
Yeah.
singer. You know.
The ones who survived, I think, and who are other than Dylan himself, who became something else.
Okay, name them.
Oakes
Yes.
and Paxton. Those are the only names people know, I think, from that period who are really identified with that genre. So I want to talk about
Okay, well, what happened?
them a little
basically,
bit and their
what
writing.
I react to, now I would have to go through the album numbers.
Right.
So first, it's like Josh White or Pete Seeger or Lead Belly or Burl Ives, the guy with a guitar, right? Then you can see I made some nasty notes. Then I had Bill Lee as the bassist. Everyone sounded like him.
Right.
Everyone sounds like Steve Harvey Brooks, sound like him. And then at some point, another type of folk music becomes important. Now I don't remember the order anymore. Everyone was playing with symphony orchestras practically behind them. Whether it was Joan Baez or any, but they were all doing symphony orchestra stuff with arrangements like these old former left-wing composers, arrangers became the arrangers for these things. And all these people changing their names. Bob de Cormier becomes Bob Corman, and Ernie Lieberman is Ernie Sheldon, and all these weird changes. And that's called folk music. Then all of a sudden, they're not putting out orchestral music anymore. Understand? Then they all started putting out country music thing, because that's folk music. So that means what was happening, the folk music ideals that I grew up with or picked up on or was interested in myself, that was being buffeted by the commercial tides. So very few people survived that. Now, you say that only Tom Paxton has survived out of that whole group.
No, what I'm saying is that when people look back at early 1960s, topical singer-songwriters, the names that always come up today are Oakes and Paxton. Those are the ones that are remembered. And they wrote some song, I Ain't Marching Anymore, Draft Dodger Rag with Oakes, Paxton, What Did You Learn in School Today? And I don't think that there is anybody else who is quickly remembered today as being a topical songwriter out of the early 60s.
Who else was writing? I have to...
Other than Dylan, those are the two. Spolstra did a few on Folkways, but nobody heard them and nobody remembers them. Gil Turner was writing topical songs, but nobody heard them and nobody remembers them.
Julius Lester.
Julius Lester, nobody heard them, nobody remembers them. Len Chandler, same thing. Now all these people,
Well, Len
Peter
Chandler-
LaFarge, were topical songwriters.
Len Chandler's still working with those singer-songwriting workshop here
Yeah,
in
he
California.
still works, but in terms of
And he
people-
writes really good songs, good text, good musical ideas, but it obviously can't sell.
Yeah.
He hasn't figured out a way to sell.
That people
Dick
remember-
Weissman was doing songs at the time. Nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Him and Pat Foster.
Yeah.
Pat Foster disappeared.
And that's in the sense that I say that Paxton and Oakes are the names that are remembered for topical
Well,
songs.
Harry Belafonte was a kind of protest singer for a while.
He's not identified as that. That I think is a fair statement.
And as I told you before, Pete Seeger's never ever been identified as a singer-songwriter. And in Denmark, he would say, Izzy's right, I am a singer-songwriter, but I didn't have to make a living from it the way everyone else did. But
Did
he's
you-
making a living for the way everyone else is doing.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the topical song movement of the 60s and broadside.
Okay.
Did you get so much? Did you have much involvement in that personally, other than as an observer, say?
Well, Broadside starts, and Josh Dunson gives me a little credit in the book, Freedom in the Air. He says, Izzy took 50 copies. So that was my automatic response. Whether it was the Boston Songbook, 50 copies of anything.
Okay.
So I'm not giving myself credit for it, but I took it in automatically with my umbrella view. Everything should be in there, commercial, non-commercial, political. And I was becoming political myself. Say in 1961, when the crunch came, it was me that stood up to the city, not Pete Seeger, not Ernie Lieberman, not Jerry Silverman. It was me doing it. And I'm thinking now, the reason for that was all these left-wingers were worried about the McCarthy Committee and all these other committees, where me as a straight liberal Jewish boy from Brooklyn, it's obvious that you can sing, you have the right to sing folk songs.
Right.
And I even write it in a later issue I saw yesterday, don't fall into the trap of being allowed to sing songs at 10 different spots in New York City, certain hours of the week. You should be able to sing anytime. That's what I told you on the phone when you called me in Sweden a few weeks ago. This was 3 years before the free speech movement.
Right.
With what was it, Mario
Savia.
Savia. Is he still around?
He's still around.
Is he
He's-
doing anything?
No, he's not active at all.
So that's 3 years before, and I've never really gotten credit for that. People don't understand how important it was. That's why it was a very wild experience for me to see that movie again after 30 years. Daddy's film. You can see me becoming a hero. You know, there I am dressed in a suit. You know, you see everybody is as square as you could possibly be. And my mother was on the line of march also. And Cynthia Gooding was there. One of the Clancy's was there. But Jerry Silverman came with his father, a real old-type card-carrying communist. And as soon as it was getting heavy, the police around, you can see, I'm not afraid of the deputy police commissioner in New York City. He says, let's go around. No. You can see I just turned from him.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got the nerve to do that. So I'm glad that that's in history. And that sign in the front of the store doesn't existed for maybe 5 minutes. Because one of the Italians ripped it right off. So the sign exists thanks to Danny filming it. So I go there. Ed Koch wasn't in on it either. He resented it because he's in my film. And he looked at my scrap and he was really said, well, you know, these other guys, you know, Art DeLuga and these other, they were a little smarter than me. They saw the advertising benefit of it right away. So no, he lost out on that deal. So it was a big publicity thing. Some people did try to take over. But more and more singers came, but nobody really understood it. And then when the blacklist of Pete Seeger, that was in 63, I think.
63, on Hootenanny, yeah.
That's, the first meetings were in the back of my store. And I have a pretty complete, I have about 30 pages. Now, I've sent those 30 pages, 40 pages, you know, small notebook, untyped. I sent them to Pete Seeger and never did a fucking thing about it. I sent a few pages to Dave Van Ronk, which is my sneaky way of getting him interested, you understand?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him to bite, you know, so I'm doing my intellectual thing in Stockholm, because I'm out of the scene here. He never reacted. Then when I called up Leventhal, either 3 or 4 years ago, I said, listen, he's giving a talk at some college in Long Island about the blacklist.
Who was doing that?
Harold Leventhal. So I said, I've got the complete notes. So I sent it to Harold Leventhal, special delivery, so he could get it the next day. I'm flying back to Sweden. He's never used it. So I'm asking you, why didn't anyone use this information I have? Because I quote all the arguments pro and con of Dick Weissman. Like Dick Weissman saying, well, Steve McKellar's in non, I don't want to be in on it. You know, why should we just the small guys? And Pete Seeger, who didn't lift a finger to help this in any way, because he didn't want people to lose jobs because of him.
Yeah, it said that Pete told people to go on the show and get
go
exposure.
On the show and like John Cohen, he went right on the show. He didn't give a shit about anything. And when it came to the crunch, John Cohen was ready to go on anything. When we had the 1965, the first concert against the war, which maybe write that article on Dylan. Barbara Dane and Erwin Silva behind this thing, basically anti-war committee, to write to all the traditional singers. And John Cohen said, we have no right to write to Rufus this or Joe this or his people this or Chandler that, because these people are just ordinary country people. And Barbara's argument was, these people are not just ordinary, their kids are getting killed. John Cohen's not getting killed. Izzy Young's not getting killed. John Cohen got out of the army and everyone else got out. So their kids getting killed. They're the ones should be. So he felt these traditionalists are just dumb, simple, innocent people. They're not dumb, simple, innocent people. They're people that are dying, and we should be helping them. So John Cohen would always defend Mo Ash when it was convenient for him. So, for example, when they made the films at Brisky Point, as John Cohen always points out, who's his singer from Kentucky? With a high nasal voice.
A woman?
A man. Come on, you're supposed to know. I can't think of his name now. So they use one of his songs, and he gets $1,000. But Mo Ash keeps it at 500. He says if this traditional singer gets 500. I said, come on, John, that's completely wrong. I mean, how many chances does your favorite pal get of getting $1,000 in taste for the money? Mo Ash gets more chances than that. So it depends. No, that's the way it is. It's 50-50. I see 50-50 is fair now. When he made his movies with the singers, they got no money from it because I'm the one that's laying out the money. So there's no difference between you and Hollywood. In other words, you're laying out $5,000 at a time, and the singer's laying out his life.
Sure.
So his life isn't worth as much as, and that I've learned to my bitter moments. But the only thing that's worth anything is the exploitation of something, not the idea. So when I'm going back a little bit, because I've written down these things, which is my private reaction, I was able to write about it, to what's going on around me. And then Ron comes to Stockholm and opens up my notebooks really for the first time, as if I'm dead, buried. And I can't believe that the notebooks still exist. Mm-hmm. And he goes through this stuff, and he's really having a ball for 10 days, which is a long time to spend in somebody's house. And we got along very well, actually. And I give him this stuff, and I ask him to write something, saying that it will not be used without my permission, et cetera, et cetera. And he looks at me like I'm a madman. So I said, well, I don't want your schmuck friends to use this. I don't want you to use this. I don't want anyone to use this. So it's between you and me, like my stuff with Dick Boys. So he looks at me, what are you talking about? So then I realized, you're right. The only thing that's valuable about this is using it. If someone else is writing a book, let him use it. I can do my own book. But the thing that was bugging me is what I now call time pegs. People, including you, can now get these time pegs and put an exact date when something would change. Between March, April, 61, 62. And I say, when I do this, I'm letting the genie out of the bottle. I shouldn't do it. Who are you? Who is Dr. Cohen? Who is anybody? And then I decided, in other words, I should be coming here with you with a paper that you sign that you can't use any of the papers until, which is what's normally done in the trade. Am I right or wrong?
You're right. You're right.
So I am not protecting myself in any way. But the other side of me is, well, now in California, I'll see Mark, so that's the way I look upon it in a totally philosophical way. I'm already who could dream I'm looking down the street? It's already, that's like opening up my mind. So that's where I get the idea that let everything come out. I don't care who has it. But I do resent the fact that Pete Seeger and Harold Leventhal didn't do something about the only documentation of that blacklist. The people came in, Eric Darling's arguments and Judy Collins' arguments and Theo B. Kell's arguments and Harry Belafonte says, I can't come in today, but call me up if something happens.
Now, did you send them your only copies of things, or did you retain...
No, I have them. But you have 2 or 3 pages
right.
that I started to type out.
Sure.
No, I didn't send them the notebooks.
Okay.
But I do resent the fact that they didn't use it. So that means that Leventhal and Pete Seeger are in on the commercial end without talking about it, even though they're still dreaming some communist thing, or Leventhal is doing everything he possibly can to further the name of Woody Guthrie. So I'm at Steve Rath's place last week, and he plays me Billy Bragg do the Deportee song. I'll tell you, it turns me off. No reaction to it. And I realized what Leventhal is doing. He'll do everything to get it out, whether it's Billy Bragg or Harry Belafonte. If I would sing it, that would be part of the process of him getting out into national consciousness as a new Ernest Hemingway or John Steinbeck, which he's not. I feel like Woody Guthrie wrote some terrific songs, and he also wrote tons of garbage, and they're not doing him a favor by, and I don't think it's selling either.
Was the Washington Square marches your first entry into politics, radicalization, or what have you?
You can call it that. Well, you can see I'm unaware of that in the film as it happens.
Well, you're unaware of it at the time, but sure, in retrospect, was that your first?
Well, you can see I even have a jacket on, which
yeah.
no one's ever seen me on again. I think I have a tie and I'm shaved, and my hair is down. Except I never thought of myself as radical.
Right.
It was just something that had to be done. Which I'm only amazed much later, surprised that where are all these other people that think I was telling you that Jerry Silverman, when we stopped, Jerry, as soon as the policeman started circling us, paddy wagon, he and his communist father disappeared. The next day, Jerry Silverman comes to the store and says, "How do we do, Izzy?" So what do you mean, how do we do? I did this and I did this, but not you or not your father or anything. And then about a few years later, Julius Lester told me that he was sitting in the square with Rap Brown, and he saw me. And by some schmucky, stupid accident, I happened to be walking with Jerry Silverman, a guy who I really don't like. And he said because Jerry Silverman was walking next to me, because there's always a lot of people going there. So I didn't see him, but he saw me. So I didn't introduce him to Rap Brown. So Julius Lester became the dark horse of Sing Out magazine. Him, Paul Nelson came in, and he was supposed to revolutionize. It means Ethel Raymond and all the other people saw him as the answer for the black problem, which is typical, like PC picked up on Reverend Kirkpatrick to represent the black people. Trying to stick this lousy couple serious business on me for my thing. And I said, I'm not dead yet. When I'm dead, you can do anything about it. I want to say it was on the program. Anyway, what was I saying? I'm going. I think I'm blacking out. What was I just saying? So Julius Lester started coming out with these pro-black things, this and pro-black things, that. Even racist mouthings, and everyone accepted it, including me. Now, in my notebook, I don't remember which year it is, but it's after 63, maybe 65. I'm sitting in a room talking to Julius Lester and Reverend Kirkpatrick. A lot of people think that Reverend Kirkpatrick was great, but I never liked him. And I still have a letter I wrote to him. Dear Mr. Kirkpatrick, I thank you for all your revolutionary ardor and the revolutionary work you're doing in America and the revolutionary this. But please pay me the $30. I sold him a guitar at cost. Please pay me the $30, that you owe me something. And I understood that. He must have taken a piece for thousands of dollars. So I'm sitting there within a room, maybe the Folklore Center, and Julius and Reverend Kirkpatrick are telling me, now I have a serious problem. Can I publish this while I'm alive? And I want to publish all my stuff before I'm dead, while I'm alive. Because when you publish stuff when you're dead, then it doesn't mean anything. Julius says, he, together with Kirkpatrick, said, if it was to be a revolution in America, God gave rid of liberals, eliminated liberals, like Reverend Martin Luther King and Pete Seeger. And I write it in the journal, my journal, and I concurred, which is a very weak, lousy, shitty word. In other words, I was afraid to say no. I went along with them because that's a legal expression. Concurred.
That's what I was thinking.
It's not the kind of word that I use. I have a much bigger vocabulary than I use. So I have a problem publishing that because if I publish that, then I have to put a proviso under that. I really didn't. I felt bulldozed by these two big black people in the movement, who are not really connected to black people. So he got away with a lot of crap, with Snick, and then his first wife left him. And
Kirkpatrick?
No, Julius Lester.
Okay.
Then he had this program on Pacifica BAR where he played John Coltrane day and night. He was actually some good things. He had these long talk programs. He was the big deal with Snick, and then he went to Vietnam. And then the only meeting he had about it was in my store right after he left Vietnam. He gave a talk on his experiences in Vietnam at the Folklore Center. And then maybe 2 months later, he puts me down for being small. And I says, look, if I sell 1 million copies of a book, Izzy, and I'm not taking money away from anybody. In other words, what communist left-wing always tell you, if I put on a concert and people pay $25, $10,000, I'm not cheating anybody. They're paying for it. Or a basketball game, and I'm saying a concert should be $2. And I was arguing with them. It's wrong for Miles Davis to play at Lincoln Center, $25 a ticket, and he invites 10 kids from Harlem that he takes out of his own pocket to come to the concert. he should do a concert in Harlem for $2, so the kids can do it. You understand? So this $25 thing is separating it. You may give free tickets, including me, but it's separating itself from the people. So Julius Lester, when I meet him on the street, and I said, I know you wrote that down in your notebook, Izzy, and I'm sure you're going to use it one day, but that was just a momentary weak. I said, no, it's not a momentary weakness on your part, it's the way you're thinking. And now he's a super Jew, because 1/4 of his grandparents is Jewish. So now he's a professor of Jewish studies, and he's a hardliner against kill the fucking Palestinians. He's very hard on the Palestinians. He won't budge an inch. And I find that very, very strange. Because I told you I'm the president of Jews for the Israeli-Palestinian peace in Sweden. I've met Arafat and Ashwawi and Faisal Husseini. Well, it's not the same thing as Sweden and America. If I had those meetings at my focal center in New York City, it would be bombed by the Jewish Defense League. So I was very, very disturbed by him not ever ending up doing anything. And I never liked Kirkpatrick. And then Paul Nelson, who I did like, I even wrote, I was going to do a book with him, which never happened. I was dumb. I should have done some kind of book at the time. I had the possibilities 2 or 3 times to do books. People in the village from publishing companies asked me to do it. And I never felt I was ready, but I threatened that every once in a while I have these little snide remarks that I'm going to do a book on one of these things. Somebody writes that one of the greatest things that happened in America is Izzy's speech on the death of folk music in America. I wish I had that lecture. And then I found a card. When I used to give lectures, I would write down my main points. And I don't, for some reason, there's no year on it, or it must have fallen out of a notebook. An index card, a normal 3x5 index card. And I have the outline of folk music, me in the Bronx, Margot Mayo, folks say, Little City Ramblers, John Hurt, 2 parallel things going. When I go back, I'll make a copy, because it'll be interesting for you. Because I'm not sure, it's around 1970. And what do I say in this? 1967, I put in parentheses, the end of protest. So I say, how the hell could I have written that? Because 1968 is supposed to be the year of protest. So already I'm indicating 67 is the end of protest. I will send that to you, because you will flip when you see that. So all the people I knew that were protesting were doing very little more about it than protesting. And that's why I write about Phil Oakes, that at some point you just become a hard-working, useful product for the companies, and then you drop when you stop producing, when it's something else.
There's a lot made, I think more than it should be made, but there's a lot made of folkies going down to the south, the Mississippi Caravan and what have you, voter registration drives are going down.
Well, I thought it was bullshit.
What were your reactions to that? This is in the early 60s, people going down for civil rights.
Well, I read about it. It was like reading about it in Life magazine, the Saturday Evening Post. It was completely extraneous for me. Bob Dylan down there, Joan Baez down there, Judy Collins down there, Phil Oakes down there. And I don't know if I had an animus against it at the time, but I felt no connection with it. And me feeling personally, if you insult France, it's like insulting de Gaulle. If you're insulting folk music, you're insulting me personally. I had no particular pride in that, I've written up. Bob Shelton, when it was in '63, he's got a long, full-page article, which I'm sure was approved by somebody else, not by me. How great it was. But I just saw these people, I don't think at the time, but later, that these people were running down to Mississippi for 3 hours, roiling up the people there on all sides, and leaving. And roiling and leaving and roiling and leaving. And somehow they saw at that time that was the way to get publicity. Whereas today, now you do publicity for AIDS or farmers, and today it's a much different scene, because today these benefits cost the singers a lot of money now, but they're getting billions of watchers. They do a thing for Bangladesh, then they do a thing for, what was that thing in Africa that was so popular for a while, where kids are still starving?
Ethiopian famine.
Yeah, but there was a place. All the photographers used to go there.
I know. I have a friend who went there, but I don't remember. Yeah.
So now I look back, these kids are still starving there. Dana Davies was there. Everybody was there. And then suddenly the next year they're not there. But the kids are still starving there. The kids are still dying there. And so it means that the folk singers had to go for the juggler. And the juggler is TV and radio and newspapers. So when that, and they, as I said, when I did the concert, I'll have to send you that also, the list of the people who attended. It's interesting to find out the list of people that weren't part of it. Because as I told you, I resented very much that Peter, Paul, and Mary flew down to Washington. And Al Grossman said, I don't know, it's more important that my singers work for civil rights voting than to be against the war. And Moesh himself wasn't very hot about it.
And your concert was in '65?
Well, I was part of it, Sing Out, Erwin Silva.
Right, but that was '65.
Jack Holzman, Harold Leventhal. And people was hitting us then and saying, we got to be democratic, we got to show both sides. And Jack Holzman said, what do you mean both sides? All the newspapers are for the war. And we're getting Carnegie Hall one lousy night, it's costing $5,000. And Leventhal says, fuck them.
Who appeared for you? Who did play for you?
I'll send you the list.
Okay.
It was everybody that you know every single name, except Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary. And that article I wrote, Bob Dylan Taunt, was written that night when I was sitting there. So I write that a man's private life, this is my article I wrote in 1965, when Bob Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary didn't come to the anti-war concert where they both could have come. Now they're trying to find an excuse. They think he was in Texas now. And I say a man's private life is his own, but for the artist it is the matter of his art. The artist finally bears himself to us and we are moved. The artist exalts in his life, and so we share it. The honest artist cannot be heard. Jack Elliott cannot be heard as an interpreter. Allen Ginsberg cannot be heard as a creator. See how I'm making that distinction? And that's why I say later killed Jack, trying to be a creator. They're what they are. We share in their lives. We are moved. We are cleansed. We are made richer. Bob Dylan cannot exalt in his life now because it would upset the image he has cultivated among the record-buying public. He can be heard. He is forced to a brilliant obscurity in his writing so that people will continue to buy his records, the same people he wants nothing to do with. Why can't he just continue to sing and they just continue to send him invisible nickels and dollars? Don't Frank Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald do the same thing? Yes and no. Yes, and that you pays him money and he takes a choice, knowing that they do not claim the holy title of poet, which he is claiming. So he has obscured his words, he has intensified his voice. His voice now tells the true story of Bob Dylan. He screams from the bottomless pit and is truly heart-rending, but it is like sharing something dirty. It is no longer the open arena of life's possibility, and we mourn for it. Not I, we. Well, we. Now, Bob Dylan, when he got this article, he got it before it was published, the way I've always done with these things. He said it was the best article ever written on him. And the last time I saw him in 72, he also said it's the best article. Because if you compare this article to who's the guy, Ralph Gleason's article, which was crap. Have you read that article? It's pap. And that Hentos article. And so I'm in this peculiar position that Josh Dunstan, who's much more of a left-wing than ever be, his parents, international publishers, Auerbach, Communist Party. When Phil Oakes died, he said, Phil Oakes dead, I can't believe it. I just only remember the days when he was smiling, we were all happy together. But he doesn't really know what we were all happy about, what we've all lost. So that's why I feel that I'm constantly reacting to the left and to the manipulations of the left and the changes of the left. As I wrote, you have to read that tonight, that I was picking up on the left-wing idealism, and somehow it infused me, and I became part of this ideal which everybody was running away from, like a sinking ship.
What did you think of Oakes' stuff, for instance, in the early 60s? It was all rigidly topical. He never deviated from that line.
I never thought he was a very good singer. I never thought he was a very good musician. But somehow it added up to something good.
Did you find him to be valid as a part of the scene, or?
Oh, he was part of the scene. I write about him. His name is mentioned as much as anybody else's.
Do you consider him a folk singer?
No question. He's a folk singer. I had his records in the store, but I thought it was a little odd when he felt he had to do Elvis Presley and go out with Gold Lame. And then I read that book, when I see all the phony stories that went into the editing and added stuff, recorded stuff.
Other than people running down to Mississippi to get involved in voter registration or civil rights or what have you, was there any political activity in the village folk scene in the early 60s, any benefits for local causes or national causes?
Oh, there was a lot of stuff for SNCC and CORE and housing and voter registration. There was a lot of that.
What type of concerts? People put on?
Mostly concerts. In other words, you would call up Happy Traum and then Dave Enrock and then whoever was around at the time. Jack Elliott would be there, Phil Oakes, Bob Dylan, Judy Collins. And I can't think of all the names now, but it was very common to have benefits.
Where would they be performed? Just in various clubs or
public schools, clubs. Pete Seeger was at every single benefit that ever was. And he was in Oakland last year, and he did a benefit concert for Irwin's magazine, which Ron sent me. Says, what? Irwin was living like a millionaire, and Pete's doing a free concert for him. I said, well, that's Pete. And even I said something to Leventhal a year ago. And he said something, not to me, I think on the telephone. He said something. Pete doesn't give to anything. He sings. So that was an interesting, and that's how Pete supports things. Now, at that time, there would be a thing for the Puerto Rican independence, and there would be 87 people in the audience. There was Pete. Malvina Reynolds, if she'd be in town, you'd always see her and things like that. There would be a thing about Haitian Communist Party having its annual meeting. There was Pete, 112 mulatto, red mulatto Haitians, a certain type. There was Pete. There was a thing for Spanish this, Chinese this. I never heard of Pete actually ever turning down a benefit or anything, unless he's actually physically can't. And people would constantly call me up, asking me for Pete Seeger to be in the benefit or be with Miguel. And I would say, listen, there's a singer here, Bob Dylan is here. No, we want someone who can draw people. And that's what it really boiled down to. But they only wanted 3 top names. That was Leo Miguel, Pete Seeger at that time, as I remember. People would always be asking for them.
Yeah, well, that's clearly pre-Dylan. That's very early 60s or 50s. Yeah.
Now, Pete Seeger had this People's Artist, and I cannot believe to this day I know nothing about it. The only thing I know is what I read in Dick Royce's book. I don't know anything about, except I suspected him, as I told him when I did my catalog in '55. I don't like you communists, but I want to put you in People's Songbook with your voice. I'm not aware of the mechanism of how it worked. I actually got steamed up when Irwin Silva sold the bankrupt magazine to us for $14,000. It was a lot of money at that time, making a cooperative out of it, which he actually got money. We all had to lay in $100 and $50. And we got a debt, which is probably just being paid off now. So he got rid of a fantastic debt after he sucked all the money out of it, after he got the work with Moash, with Oak Publications, which he got a 2-year salary plus commissions on this and all the books that he wrote. So suddenly, he made a collective out of this. Now, I wrote a 10-page thing on it, which Ron found. I can't make head or tails of it. I have an hour harangue with Dick Royce telling him how everyone's screwing me, or the magazine. But I don't understand the mechanism, and I don't think anyone can explain it anymore. But I know that I felt like surrounded by dishonesty. Ethel Rain, she was always on the side of the winner. She made sure that she never was on my side. Except after the meeting, she would be on my side. But at the meeting, and Pete would keep pretty quiet. Irwin Silver and Barbara Dane were the only ones that spoke revolutionary.
This was on the board of Sing Out.
Yeah,
in the early 60s, before when Irwin was still managing.
Yeah. Okay. And then when he gave it up. Well, I have extensive notes on that, and I can't make head or tail out of it, which means I don't understand the left-wing schisms that were taking place behind the scene. In just the way that I didn't know of the schisms at the Lead Belly Memorial Concert or the Woody Guthrie Memorial Concert. I always resented it at the time. Even at that time, Pete Seeger was always writing about Woody Guthrie in the past tense. And I don't know if that's a nice way of getting rid of somebody. Although, from what I understand, he was a pain in the ass to everybody. And I'd seen Woody Guthrie a few times. And Harold Leventhal took me out to the hospital once. And Jerry Silverman was there, and he had his brand new modern guitar that he was going to show Woody. And so we, oh, guitar, let me take it. So he's jumping around. And I said, oh my God, it's the end of my $1,200 guitar. So he took it, and he actually played. Consistently played. I don't remember what song it was. And then he told some story, and he's in this beautiful lawn outside of a hospital in New Jersey. And people don't look any more crazy than you and me. I mean, they obviously know what they're doing, these crazy people. It's better sitting under a tree than working somewhere without security. And I just remember one joke he made at the time, and he was in very bad shape already. He said, you see this beautiful house, like you see college dormitories. You see these little windows with ivy, and then you go in and see the rooms. You can't believe they're tiny little cubicles. But from the outside, they look beautiful. The ivy terraces, and then when you go inside, they're just horrible little cubicles. So listen, I'm in a room with 14 or 16 other people, and when I scratch my ass, everybody scratches their ass. That was his description of the situation.
Did Pete have, from what you could see of Pete's career and Pete's life, you touched on this yesterday, and you said you want to talk about Pete a little later, so maybe we can touch on it now. I sense he's had a lot of conflicts between his political background and beliefs and his commercial yearnings and desire to be accepted. And, what is your take on Pete, the political versus Pete, the commercial singer-songwriter or performer?
I used to think that would be the only one that could get the truth out of Pete. And when I get back to the entire film footage of the film on me, there's a 6-minute thing where I slash Pete for 6. Here's this guy doing a favor for me. He's sitting with me a whole day. I start the day with an attack on him. You fucking communist! You did this, you did that, and I thought that would break him. All I had was a little supercilious grin on his face. He just, like being hit by laser beams for 6 minutes, and you just have to withstand that. And he said, "Well, it was very nice. It was good to see you." You go, "Wow, your kid is 12, whatever." And that guy, as I started to tell you yesterday, he's a singer-songwriter. He never himself called himself. I was the one that created that concept in Denmark. I said, you're talking to a singer-songwriter, he's not just a singer. I said, Izzy's right, but he's wrong, because I never had to make a living from writing songs the way everyone else did.